January 3rd, 2026, 2 o'clock in the morning. For the first time in history, the lights of Caracas didn't just flicker. They were extinguished from the outside. While a part of the city sat in total darkness, 150 American aircraft were screaming through the Venezuelan sky. This was Operation Absolute Resolve. The target wasn't just a military base. It was a man inside a steel-fortified fortress. Nicolás Maduro reached for his safe room door, and he was seconds too late.
And he wasn't able to make it to the door because our guys were so fast. They went through the opposition so fast, and there was a lot of opposition. It was a very thick door. It was a very heavy door, but he was unable to get to that door. He made it to the door. He was unable to close it.
By dawn, the leader of the world's largest oil reserve was on a plane to New York to face the full wrath of American justice. But as the smoke clears over Caracas, the real question begins. The US says they are running the country. The oil giants are moving in, and the neighbors are screaming act of war. This is how the world changed in 30 minutes. What is going on, everyone? I'm Kevin Muñoz. Today is Monday, January 5th. Welcome to the Leo Podcast, your go-to for insightful discussions on various educational topics with a focus on issues impacting the Latin American community. Today, we aren't just talking about a headline. We are talking about a generational shift. While the world watches the high-definition footage of Maduro in a New York courtroom, we need to look at what's happening beneath the surface. We're going to break down the reimbursement model Trump is proposing, look back at the historical ghosts of Panama and Guatemala to see where this is headed, and discuss what this means for the millions of Venezuelans, both in Caracas and across the diaspora. Is this the liberation that we've waited for, or are we witnessing the birth of a 21st century corporate colony? Let's get into it. This wasn't just a strike. It was a surgical removal. Well, for the most part, because Venezuelan government has claimed there were civilian casualties and damage to non-military infrastructure. Codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, it was the culmination of 5 months of military buildup. Over 150 aircraft were in the air, from F-22 Raptors and F-35s to B-1 Lancer bombers. But 150 planes don't just fly in circles. They had a list. According to BBC Verify, the strikes were surgically targeted to decapitate the regime's ability to fight back. Here's the map of the minutes that changed Caracas. Target 1, La Carlota, the airbase, the heart of the capital's military aviation. Footage shows 2 massive plumes of smoke rising from the runway. The US didn't just want the base, they wanted to ensure no Venezuelan jets could scramble to intercept the extraction team. Target 2, Fuerte Tiuna, this is the big one. It's the largest military complex in the country and the headquarters for the Ministry of Defense. Satellite heat signatures confirmed massive fires here. By hitting Tiuna, the US paralyzed the top brass of the Venezuelan military while Delta Force was moving on Maduro's compound nearby. Target 3, Port La Guardia and Higuerote Airport. These are the back doors located in Miranda State. These coastal sites were hammered to block any escape by sea or private jet. Target 4, Antenas El Volcán. This was perhaps the most critical strike for the blackout. By targeting the telecom towers on Cerro El Volcán, the US didn't just cut the power, they cut the regime's ability to communicate with its own troops. In under 30 minutes, Caracas was blind, deaf, and trapped. And that is when the ground teams moved in. To stay under the radar, the extraction force led by the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, or Night Stalkers, flew just 100 feet above the waves of the Caribbean. While U.S. Cyber Command effectively turned off the lights in Caracas to blind the regime's sensors, Delta Force and FBI hostage rescue teams were already on the ground at Fuerte Tiuna, the massive military complex that served as Maduro's sanctuary. The U.S. military didn't go in blind. They had built a full-scale replica of Maduro's compound months ago to rehearse the breach. President Trump noted that while troops were equipped with massive blowtorches to cut through reinforced steel, they were so fast that Maduro was caught before he could even reach his secure bunker. The door was still swinging open when they found him, but why capture him? Well, according to Attorney General Pam Bondi, she unsealed the charges immediately: narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, and possession of machine guns. The US isn't calling him a political prisoner. They're calling him a cartel leader, specifically the head of the cartel de los Soles. But while Washington celebrates, the remnants of the Maduro government are telling a very different story. On state television, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez appeared in an audio message appealing for calm and unity among the people. She was defiant, calling Maduro the only president and declaring that Venezuela would never become a colony of any nation. But here is where it gets strange. Earlier that day, President Trump claimed at Mar-a-Lago that Rodriguez had actually been sworn in as president and had spoken with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Trump told reporters, "She told us she'll do whatever you need," and that she really doesn't have a choice. The Venezuelan government immediately fired back with an official statement denouncing what they called extremely serious military aggression against their territory and population. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez went even further. He claimed the U.S. strikes weren't just tactical. He said they hit civilian areas, leaving a trail of dead and injured that the government is still trying to tally. His message to the North was clear: Venezuela will resist the presence of any foreign troops. They are accusing the U.S. of a singular goal: seizing strategic resources, particularly oil and minerals, to forcibly break the nation's independence. As the two sides trade accusations, the question remains: did the U.S. find a partner in Rodriguez, or did they just create a new generation of martyrs? So as of today, January 5th, we have a total collision of narratives. We have the U.S. claiming a cooperative transition and a defiant regime in Caracas claiming a bloody act of war. With Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, now behind bars in New York, reportedly at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, the U.S. military transition began instantly. But as Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth took the stage at Mar-a-Lago, the world realized the capture was the easy part. Because now we have to ask, has this actually happened before? And if so, how did it end? Before we look at the future of the Venezuelan oil fields, we have to look back. Because if you want to know what happens when the US captures a Latin American leader, you don't look at the news, you look at history books. Operation Absolute Resolve might look like a modern thriller, but to historians, it looks like a rerun. The US has a century-long habit of changing regimes in its backyard, and the results are rarely clean. First, look at Panama, 1989. President George H.W. Bush sent 27,000 troops to capture Manuel Noriega. The charge? Drug trafficking. The result? A military extraction that looks identical to Maduro's. Noriega was taken to Florida, tried, and imprisoned. It was a tactical success, but it left Panama as a U.S. proctorate for decades. But why is Trump talking about oil companies reimbursing the U.S.? For that answer, we go to Guatemala, 1954. The CIA overthrew President Jacobo Arbenz not for drugs, but for United Fruit. When a nation's resource threatened U.S. corporate profits, the Banana Republic playbook comes out. Is 2026 just the oil republic version of 1954? 1954. Finally, there is the ghost of Iraq 2003. Trump says the US will run Venezuela until a transition. We've heard that before. It was called the Coalition Provisional Authority. It promised a quick handoff. It delivered an 8-year insurgency and total state collapse. Can the US military run a country of 28 million people without creating a new Baghdad in the Andes? History shows us that capturing the dictator is the easy part. It's what happens when the oil companies move in that the real war begins. Venezuela sits on a massive 303 billion barrels of crude oil, roughly 17% of the entire planet's reserves. It is more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. But for 20 years, that wealth has been trapped beneath a rotting surface. On Saturday, Donald Trump made his intentions clear. We are in the oil business. The players are familiar. The names moving in are the giants of American industry. Chevron is already there, exporting 150,000 barrels a day under limited waivers, but the real story is the return of ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips. These companies haven't forgotten the billion they lost when Hugo Chavez seized their assets in 2007. For them, this isn't just a business opportunity, it's a debt collection 2 decades in the making. But it's not as simple as turning on a tap. Trump described the infrastructure as rotted, and he's right. Some of these pipelines haven't been updated in 50 years. Analysts from Rystad Energy estimate that to get to Venezuela back to its former glory of 2 million barrels per day, it will require a staggering $110 billion of an investment over the next decade. This is where the reimbursement model comes into play. Trump stated that the US will be reimbursed for everything we spend using the money coming straight out of the ground. What he means by this is that he's proposing that US oil giants will foot the bill for the repairs, and in exchange, the US will oversee the sales and use the profits to pay back the American taxpayer for the cost of the military operation. To some, it's a Marshall Plan for the Andes, a way to jumpstart a failed economy. To critics like Senator Bernie Sanders, it's rank imperialism, a 21st century corporate takeover. In Caracas, the remnants of the regime call this imperialist aggression. But in Miami, the diaspora is cheering for the return of American talent to the oil fields. The question for the Venezuelan people is simple. Would you rather have your oil run by a local dictator or a foreign corporation? The moment Maduro's plane touched down in New York, the diplomatic world fractured. For the first time in the 21st century, the US didn't just support a coup, it performed an extraction, and the world's reaction was instant and angry. Venezuela's neighbors are in shock. Brazil's President Lula says the U.S. has crossed an unacceptable line. Colombian President Gustavo Petro called it an assault on Latin American sovereignty. But their fear isn't just theoretical. It's also physical. Petro has already deployed the Colombian military to the border, bracing for a potential wave of millions of refugees. And he has reason to be nervous. Just hours after the strike, President Trump warned Petro on Fox News that he has to watch his ass, claiming Colombia is running cocaine factories. The message was pretty clear. Venezuela was just the beginning. This is what Trump is now calling the Monroe Doctrine, a 2026 update to the Monroe Doctrine. He's already signaled that Mexico is next on the list, claiming President Claudia Sheinbaum doesn't run Mexico, the cartels do. He even hinted that Cuba should be very concerned about their future. To the east, the condemnation is even sharper. Russia calls it armed aggression. China is deeply shocked. For Moscow and Beijing, this isn't about democracy. It's about their own billions in investments that just vanished overnight. In the West, the reaction is a polite divide. The UK's Keir Starmer said he would shed no tears for Maduro, but the EU and the UN are deeply alarmed, warning that ignoring international law sets a dangerous precedent where any leader could be snatched from their home by a more powerful military. Even the Middle East is feeling the shockwave. In Israel, opposition leader Yair Lapid posted a warning to Tehran telling them to pay close attention to Caracas. Meanwhile, Iran has already threatened to strike U.S. bases in the region if Washington tries this adventurism anywhere else. But it's not all condemnation. In Argentina, Javier Milei is celebrating, shouting, "Freedom moves forward." The world is now split into two camps, those who see a dangerous violation of law and those who see a necessary end to a narco-dictatorship. Nicolás Maduro is no longer a president in the eyes of the U.S. court system. He is now a defendant. But as he prepares to face narco-terrorism charges in New York, the legal battle is just beginning. His lawyers will likely argue head of state immunity, but the U.S. has a ready answer. They haven't recognized him as a legitimate leader since 2024. Back in Caracas, the hour of freedom has been declared. Machado is calling for Edmundo Gonzalez, the man that the world says won the 2024 election, to take his constitutional mandate. But can he? The Venezuelan military, though hit hard, is still intact. Without their support, Gonzalez is a president with a title but no power. And then there's the chaos in the shadows. With the Maduro regime decapitated, criminal organizations like Tren de Aragua, which the U.S. has labeled a terrorist group, could turn Venezuela into a warlord state. The U.S. military says they will run the country to prevent this, but running a country and building one are two very different things. Venezuela is the first major geopolitical domino to fall in 2026. Whether this leads to a democratic rebirth or a corporate-backed occupation remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the Monroe Doctrine is back, and it's carrying a heavy price tag. What do you think? Is this the liberation Venezuela needed, or a dangerous precedent for the rest of the world? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching. And that wraps up today's dive into this week's most pressing story. If you learned something new from this episode, if you had that wait what moment, or if it just helped you connect a few more dots, do me a favor, follow, rate, and share this podcast with your people. Let's get these conversations out of the shadows and into our communities. And to all my amazing Patreon supporters, thank you. Your support is what keeps this show going week after week. If you're not a member yet and want to show some love, check us out at patreon.com/Latinoamericaneo. I'm Kevin Muñoz, and I'll catch you in the next episode. And as always, mi gente, stay informed and stay empowered. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a family or a friend and rate it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It helps tremendously in order to bring more awareness and educational resources to our community. For more information and to stay up to date with what I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram at Latinoamericaneo. And if you need more information and resources, you can visit my website, latinoamericaneo.org. I'm Kevin Muñoz. This has been the Leo Podcast, and I'll see you next time.